Nova Lane had been waiting nearly an hour in the marble-floored foyer of the Cruz estate. The house itself was a sprawling testament to luxury, set atop rolling hills with immaculate gardens and a sweeping view of the city lights below. Despite the grandeur around her, Nova's thoughts drifted to her mother, Lena, who awaited news back in their modest apartment. Lena's medical bills loomed over them like a dark cloud, and Nova was determined to do whatever it took to keep her mother safe and cared for. Her plain black flats tapped lightly against the polished floor. She tried not to fidget, refusing to let her nerves show. After all, she was here for a housekeeping position, not an executive role. Yet for some reason, the butler had been insistent she wait for Mr. Damien Cruz himself. She remembered the way the head butler, Mr. Harrington, had all but whisked her inside upon seeing her references. It was almost as if he recognized her name, or her face. Mississippi Lane? A warm, deep voice broke her reverie. She looked up to see Damien Cruz, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a tailored suit that screamed wealth. His sandy brown hair was styled just enough to look polished without being flashy. He offered a small, polite smile. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting. May we speak in my office?" Nova stood, clasping her hands. "Of course, Mr. Cruz." She followed him down a corridor adorned with abstract art and exquisite vases. His office was more modern, glass walls, high-tech gadgets. She noticed the faint lines under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept well. Despite being a billionaire, he carried a subtle air of weariness. "So, Mississippi Lane," Damien began, settling behind a minimalist desk. "Why are you interested in working at the Cruz estate?" Nova took a breath. "I've been cleaning houses for a few families in the area. I'm organized, detail-oriented, and I believe I can help maintain your home to the highest standard." He studied her face, then glanced at her resume. "You went to community college? Business administration courses?" She nodded, shifting in her seat. "I had to leave to take care of my mother. She's sick, so I need something stable, something with medical benefits if possible." Damien's gaze softened. For a moment, he seemed to look past her professional exterior, sensing her desperation. "I see. My staff is like family to me," he said gently. "If you do well, you'll be taken care of." Relief coursed through her, but she kept her composure. "Thank you, Mr. Cruz." He offered his hand. "Welcome to the team, Mississippi Lane." Nova shook it, feeling a curious tingle in her palm. Little did she know that this moment, this simple handshake, would change both of their lives forever. Just 2 weeks after Nova began working at the estate, she found herself immersed in a world she had never known. Polishing antique furniture, organizing Damien's extensive library, and tending to freshly cut flowers were all part of her daily tasks. Yet, the more time she spent in the mansion, the more she noticed things that intrigued her. Whispers among the staff, half-hidden documents left on desks, there was talk of Damien's urgent quest to become a father. In hushed tones, the staff mentioned a tragedy in Damien's past, the loss of a loved one, some accident that had driven him to vow he would never trust relationships the same way again. Instead of finding a romantic partner to have children with, he'd set his sights on surrogacy. Late one afternoon, Nova was tasked with organizing the library shelves, which were cluttered with files and books about fertility, medical innovations, and surrogacy laws. She read a few titles before quickly placing them back, her cheeks warming at the personal nature of his research. She wondered if he was just lonely, or driven by something else. A few hours later, Nova found herself dusting a hallway when she overheard a conversation. Damien's unmistakable baritone voice emerged from behind a partially closed door. "Dr. Monroe, I need a discreet arrangement," he said firmly. "I'm aware there are agencies, but I want someone genuine, someone who understands life's difficulties, not just someone chasing a paycheck." Dr. Kira Monroe, a friend of the family and reputed to be an excellent but somewhat secretive physician, replied in measured tones. "I have some candidates in mind, but it will take time. We want to ensure their health, background, and motivations align with your wishes." Damien sighed. Time isn't exactly my luxury right now. You know my family line situation. Just do your best. The door clicked open. Nova scrambled away, feigning busyness on a nearby flower arrangement. Damien stepped out, glancing at her briefly. He offered a polite nod, but his expression seemed distant, as though he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. It made her heart lurch unexpectedly. She found herself whispering into the silence after he had passed, "I hope you find what you're looking for." She had no idea that her own life would soon become intricately entwined in that search. Within a month, the Cruz estate brimmed with subtle excitement and tension. Rumors spread that a surrogate candidate had been chosen. The day Sierra Vale arrived, the staff was abuzz with speculation. Nova, carefully arranging fresh linens in the foyer, glanced at the young woman stepping out of a sleek town car. Sierra was tall, willowy, and undeniably beautiful. She moved with confident strides up the front steps, her glossy hair catching the sunlight. She wore a designer outfit that looked more like something a Hollywood starlet would don for an awards show rather than an ordinary doctor's visit. Her arrival felt like a grand spectacle. Mr. Harrington greeted her with a deferential bow. "Miss Vale, I'll show you to Mr. Cruz's study." Nova hovered nearby, politely holding a set of towels. Sierra offered her a brief, dismissive glance, then continued walking. The faint clack of her heels echoed along the marble floor. A ripple of quiet unease settled in Nova's stomach. Something about Sierra's demeanor felt calculated. Later, when Nova carried a tray of herbal tea and refreshments to Damien's study, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation. They spoke about contracts, medical protocols, legal responsibilities. Sierra's voice was light, almost flirtatious. "I'm ready to help you, Mr. Cruz," Sierra said. "But I have my own terms, luxury accommodations, of course, and a lifestyle that ensures I stay healthy and stress-free." Damien's tone remained polite. "Naturally, we'll accommodate your needs. But let's keep things professional. I'd like to finalize this quickly." From behind the door, Nova noticed Dr. Monroe's slight frown. Was that concern? Or something else? When Nova finally entered with the tea, Sierra's gaze raked over her uniform. The corner of Sierra's mouth lifted with faint condescension. "Thank you, dear," she said, as though Nova were a fixture rather than a person. Damien cleared his throat, dismissing Nova with a small smile. She left the study, but her heart remained uneasy. Over the next week, Sierra's presence became more frequent, and so did Nova's nagging suspicion that this woman wanted much more than to be a surrogate. The forecast had warned of fierce thunderstorms, but the heavens opened more violently than anyone expected. The entire estate groaned under the pounding rain, and flickers of lightning illuminated the grand windows in sporadic flashes. Damien, anxious to finalize paperwork at a charity event across town, insisted on going despite the weather. Nova, who had come along to help manage some of his event materials, found herself riding back to the estate with him once the downpour turned biblical. Lightning crisscrossed the sky as Damien gripped the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. Nova sat in the passenger seat, trying not to tense at every thunderclap. The roads became slick, visibility almost nil. "I should have listened to the weather advisory," Damien muttered. "We're in for a rough drive." "I can help navigate," Nova offered quietly, but the swirling wind and rain made even the GPS seem uncertain. They were halfway home when the car lurched, the engine sputtering. Damien cursed under his breath, pulling over to the side. Water gushed along the roadside like a small river. They both exited, each wrestling an umbrella against the gusts, but soon realized the car wasn't going anywhere. "I'll call for help," Damien shouted over the thunder. "But we'll need shelter." A flicker of headlights behind them revealed a small cabin just off the side of the road. They ran for it, drenched by the time they reached the porch. The cabin, as luck would have it, was unlocked, a rare stroke of good fortune on this miserable night. Inside, Nova shivered, water pooling around her feet. Damien searched for a light switch. The cabin was rustic, with a faint musty smell that hinted it wasn't frequently used. His phone blinked, no signal. "Power's out," he announced grimly. Nova sighed, sinking onto a battered couch. "We'll have to wait it out." The wind howled outside, a banshee's cry in the darkness. Damien sat close to her, their bodies trembling from the cold. He found a thin blanket, draping it over both of them. An unexpected closeness settled between them, heightened by the violent storm. For a moment, they met each other's gaze. "Thank you," she whispered, her teeth chattering. He gave her a gentle smile. "We'll be okay." Yet as lightning flashed and thunder roared, a swelling warmth pooled in Nova's chest. She felt safer with him, despite the chaos outside. She never expected to feel that way, especially not about her employer. The moment seemed suspended in a heady mix of adrenaline and vulnerability. Unbeknownst to both of them, that stormy night would set events in motion they could never have anticipated. Morning light spilled into the cabin through dirt-streaked windows. The storm had subsided, leaving a crisp hush in its wake. Nova awoke on the couch, her head throbbing. A blanket was wrapped around her shoulders, and the dying embers of a makeshift fire glowed in the small fireplace. She blinked groggily, struggling to recall the latter part of the evening. Damien was sitting at the rickety dining table, phone in hand, frowning at the poor signal. As Nova sat up, he turned, relief flooding his features. "You're awake," he murmured. "How are you feeling?" She pressed a hand to her temple. "Like I've been hit by a bus." "What happened?" He set the phone aside. "We must have dozed off. You started feeling dizzy, and then you said you had a splitting headache. Honestly, I was worried you had a fever. I used some old pain meds I found here, got the fire going, and we both crashed." Nova stared at the fireplace, her memories foggy. She remembered the storm, the fear, the closeness they shared. After that, it was a blur. Her cheeks heated at the thought of any lines possibly crossed. "Did I say or do anything strange?" Damien's face colored slightly. "Nothing beyond the occasional delirious comment," he replied carefully. "You mostly just fell asleep." Confusion clung to her. She felt she was missing a piece of the puzzle, though she couldn't pinpoint why. There was a tension in the air, a quiet unspoken secret. Maybe it was just the aftermath of an intense night. "Look, Nova," Damien began, rubbing the back of his neck. "I want to thank you for your patience. I'm sorry if it was awkward. The paramedics will be here soon to check the car. We'll get back to the estate once it's drivable." She gave a small nod, trying to quell the uneasy flutter in her stomach. "All right. Let's just make sure everything's okay." The day moved on in a haze of rescue trucks and staff members fussing over them. By evening, they returned to the estate, each heading to their rooms with unspoken relief. But as Nova lay in bed, she couldn't escape the nagging sense that something had happened in that cabin, something that neither of them was fully acknowledging. Sierra Vale's presence felt more entrenched than ever. She had convinced Damien to allow her partial residency at the estate during the early screening phase of surrogacy, citing the need for constant medical supervision. In truth, she wanted proximity to the billionaire lifestyle. Nova often caught Sierra lounging by the pool, sipping imported iced teas, or checking her reflection in the glossy surfaces around the mansion. Meanwhile, Dr. Kira Monroe appeared regularly for checkups. Sierra flaunted her appointments, dropping hints about everything from vitamins to potential pregnancy cravings, though she wasn't actually pregnant yet. The official procedure hadn't even taken place. One afternoon, as Nova organized the newly delivered groceries, she heard hushed whispers from the adjoining sitting room. Carefully setting aside a carton of eggs, she leaned in to catch snippets of Sierra's conversation with someone on the phone. "Yes, I'll do whatever it takes," Sierra hissed. Damien is gullible, but his fiancée, Vivian, is no fool. She wants to ensure she and Damien remain the power couple, heir and all. She's promised me a little bonus if I can keep certain information flowing her way. Nova's pulse quickened. Vivian Black was a name she only knew from gossip, Damien's fiancé, who traveled extensively for business and rarely appeared at the estate. Most staff believed she didn't care about the day-to-day operations of the mansion. But apparently, that was far from the truth. Sierra ended the call abruptly, only to find Nova in the doorway, face pale. Sierra's features hardened, but she recovered quickly, slapping on a plastic smile. "Did you need something?" she asked sweetly. Nova forced a neutral expression. "Just putting groceries away." I didn't mean to overhear." Sierra's eyes narrowed. "Then mind your business," she snapped, pivoting sharply on her heel. "Unless you want to lose your job." Shaken, Nova returned to the kitchen. Damien was nowhere in sight, but a quiet dread formed in Nova's stomach. Something was definitely off. Sierra wasn't just a surrogate, she was an opportunist playing a dangerous game. And Vivian's name loomed like a gathering storm, threatening to throw all their lives into chaos. The next few days unfurled in tense silence. Nova tried to focus on her housekeeping duties, cleaning chandeliers and vacuuming plush carpets in the estate's many rooms. But she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Sierra was plotting something underhanded, especially where Damien's future child was concerned. Adding to Nova's disquiet, she felt nauseated each morning. At first, she chalked it up to stress from the altercation with Sierra. But as the days progressed, she found herself rushing to the nearest bathroom, stomach twisting painfully. She confided in her mother, Lena, whose voice crackled weakly over the phone. "Are you sure you're taking care of yourself, honey?" Lena asked. "You sound run down." "I'm just overwhelmed," Nova replied. But privately, she worried if she might be coming down with the flu or worse. She took pains to hide it from the estate staff, not wanting to risk her new position. She needed the job, her mother's next round of medical treatments depended on it. Yet the haunting memory of that stormy night kept resurfacing. She tried to recall every detail, the roaring thunder, the closeness she felt with Damien by the fire, the mixture of dizziness and warmth. Had she truly just been ill, or was there something else at play? Her unease spiked when she noticed Dr. Monroe rummaging through labeled test tubes in a corner suite that had been converted into a mini-lab for Sierra's surrogacy checks. On one table, she spotted a folder with the name Lane scribbled on it. But Sierra's name was Vale. Was it a clerical error, or something more sinister? Before Nova could investigate, Dr. Monroe glanced up. "Nova? Are you feeling all right? You look pale." She forced a smile. "Just busy. I'll be fine." Swallowing her suspicions, Nova continued down the hallway. A swirling dread settled in her belly. Something was definitely amiss, and it seemed to revolve around her more than she dared to admit. Unable to ignore her symptoms, Nova slipped away from the estate one afternoon to visit Dr. Kira Monroe at her private office downtown. She made the appointment under a false pretense, complaining of lingering dizziness from that stormy night. But in truth, she needed a pregnancy test. The possibility loomed, terrifying yet impossible to ignore. Sitting in the bright exam room, Nova's heart pounded. Dr. Monroe, clad in a crisp white coat, studied Nova's chart. "So you've been nauseous, fatigued, and you said your last cycle was late?" Nova nodded, eyes fixed on her hands. "Yes. I'm worried. I can't afford to be sick, not right now." Dr. Monroe offered a kind smile. "Let's run a test to be sure. It might just be stress or a vitamin deficiency." The test took longer than usual, and Nova paced the waiting room, feeling each second drag. Finally, Dr. Monroe emerged, a curious expression on her face. "Nova, I'd like you to come back into the exam room." Inside, the doctor closed the door gently. "The test is positive," she said softly. Nova's world seemed to tilt. She gripped the edge of the exam table. "I'm pregnant?" "It appears so," Dr. Monroe confirmed. "We'll run additional tests to confirm how far along you are." But based on your last cycle, it's early, maybe just a few weeks. Questions tumbled through Nova's mind. Could it have happened that stormy night? She and Damien were alone, vulnerable. But he said all they did was sleep off her feverish spell, unless there was more to the story. Fear snaked through her, but also a thrill of something she couldn't name. She swallowed hard. Thank you, Doctor. Please keep this confidential. Dr. Monroe studied her with gentle eyes. Of course, Nova. Patient-doctor confidentiality is paramount. But you know who the father is, right? Nova hesitated, then nodded numbly. She wasn't absolutely sure, but deep down, she suspected. And if that suspicion was correct, it was about to turn her life, and Damien Cruz's, completely upside down. A few days later, Damien and Dr. Monroe scheduled Sierra's surrogacy procedure to transfer an embryo. The plan was to use Damien's genetic material, ensuring he would be the biological father. However, an unsettling chain of events began when Dr. Monroe, juggling multiple files, accidentally switched Nova's blood work file with Sierra's. Unaware of the mix-up, Dr. Monroe read the pregnancy results, positive, and assumed it belonged to Sierra Vale. Ecstatic, she relayed the news to Damien, who was equally stunned and thrilled. It's happened naturally, he exclaimed, confusion lining his face. But we never completed the procedure with Sierra yet. Dr. Monroe frowned. Perhaps we underestimated Sierra's cycle. Or it's an early sign. I need to confirm with ultrasounds. Meanwhile, Sierra, who was still in a preliminary stage of fertility treatment, was blindsided when she heard she was pregnant. She quickly seized the opportunity. Yes, of course I'm pregnant, she lied, a bright smile plastered on her face. In her mind, she saw a golden ticket to secure her place in Damien's life, and a hefty payoff. Nova, oblivious to the mix-up, thought she still held the only copy of her positive test result. She vacillated between telling Damien the truth and keeping it hidden. Every time she tried to muster the courage, she recalled her precarious job situation, the looming medical bills for her mother, and the overshadowing presence of Sierra. At a routine checkup, Dr. Monroe pulled Sierra aside. Your hormone levels are higher than we anticipated at this stage. We need an ultrasound soon. Sierra paled, but pretended excitement. Inside, she panicked, trying to figure out how to keep up the charade. All the while, Damien believed he was finally on the path to fatherhood with Sierra, unaware that the real mother of his unborn child walked quietly through his mansion, carrying clean linens, never guessing the heartbreak and chaos about to unfold. Just when tensions in the Cruz estate reached a fever pitch, Damien's fiancée, Vivian Black, made a dramatic return. She swept in through the front doors, a commanding presence in a tailored designer suit, her dark hair slicked back into a severe chignon. Her eyes swept the foyer as if assessing every detail, every person, for potential leverage. Vivian wasted no time cornering Sierra. So, she said, voice silky but edged with steel, I hear you're carrying Damien's baby? Sierra, caught off guard, stammered, yes, it seems that I'm pregnant. It's a wonderful surprise. Vivian raised a perfectly arched brow. Don't spin me any fairy tales. You and I both know your place here is strictly transactional. She moved closer, her perfume strong and intimidating. Keep me informed of anything unusual, and I'll ensure you're compensated well. Sierra exhaled, relief mingling with fear. She was dealing with a formidable opponent. Of course, Miss Black. Meanwhile, Vivian set her sights on Damien. Over a lavish dinner, she played the doting fiancé but probed relentlessly. Damien, my love, it's wonderful you're finally getting the child you've always wanted. But are you absolutely sure Sierra is the right woman for this? Her background is a bit foggy. Damien sipped his wine, tired lines on his face from weeks of stress. She passed Dr. Monroe's tests, and she's comfortable with our agreement. That's enough for me. Vivian's lips curved in a knowing smile. Very well. But if anything suspicious turns up, don't say I didn't warn you. Soon after, Vivian discovered that Sierra was not the only staff member frequenting Dr. Monroe's office. Her gaze landed on Nova, who moved about the estate with newfound weariness and an odd glow Vivian's sharp eyes didn't miss. Determined to maintain control, Vivian laid a trap, planning a public confrontation that would expose the truth behind Nova's sudden pallor and Sierra's dubious pregnancy. A week later, the Cruz estate hosted a charity brunch in its expansive rose garden. High-profile guests meandered through the manicured paths, sipping champagne and nibbling on gourmet pastries. Damien mingled with donors, wearing a polite smile but checking his phone often for updates from Dr. Monroe. Sierra fluttered around, milking her supposed pregnancy for sympathetic attention. Vivian presided over the event like a queen, weaving between social circles with an air of practiced elegance. Nova was tasked with overseeing the catering staff. She moved swiftly, replenishing trays, ensuring guests were well served. Yet, the sun felt unbearably hot on her that day, and her stomach churned. She tried to hide her discomfort, not wanting to draw attention. Vivian watched Nova intently from across the garden. At precisely noon, she clinked her champagne glass, calling for attention. "Everyone, thank you for coming to this charitable event. I have a special announcement regarding our future in the Cruz household." Damien frowned, uncertain what she meant. Nova's pulse raced, a premonition of looming disaster. Vivian gestured toward Sierra. "We're thrilled to share that Sierra Vale is expecting. This child will be a blessing for Damien, and for me as well." Applause sprinkled through the crowd. Sierra forced a radiant smile. Vivian then pivoted, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "However, not everyone in this estate shares our joy. Some prefer to act behind closed doors." Her laser-like stare pinned Nova in place. "Nova Lane, dear, why don't you step forward?" Nova's heart pounded. She set down her tray, stepping forward with shaky knees. Damien's eyes darted between Vivian and Nova, confusion etched on his features. "Vivian, what is this about?" "Oh, darling, I believe the staff has a right to know." Vivian's tone dripped with smug triumph. "Nova has been intimate with you, has she not? Perhaps even carrying your child." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Damien's face hardened, and he turned sharply toward Nova. "That's impossible," he said, voice taut. "Right?" Nova's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't speak, panic strangling her words. Before she could answer, Vivian snapped her fingers, signaling security. "I won't have a scheming maid tarnishing Damien's reputation. Let's escort her off the property." In an instant, the tranquil garden transformed into a spectacle of scandal. Cameras flashed, phones recorded, and Nova felt two security guards grip her arms. Damien, stunned by the rapid turn of events, didn't intervene. Hurt and betrayal flashed across his features as he silently let them drag Nova away. The public humiliation left Nova reeling. She stood outside the estate's towering gates with her meager possessions stuffed into a bag, tears threatening to escape. She had nowhere to go but back to the cramped apartment she shared with her mother. Head spinning from Vivian's accusations, she could scarcely process the last few hours. She found Lena awake, propped up by pillows on their worn-out sofa, concern etched across her face. "Nova, sweetie, what happened?" Nova set her bag down, sinking onto a sagging armchair. I was fired," she choked out. "They accused me of," she paused, tears pricking her eyes. "Sleeping with Damien." "I'm pregnant, Mom. And I know, he's the father." Lena's eyes widened, and she gently tipped Nova's trembling hands. "My poor girl," she whispered. "You need rest. We'll figure this out together." But the next few weeks proved excruciating. Nova scoured job listings, her phone calls often going unanswered once prospective employers learned of her abrupt firing from the prestigious Cruz estate. She rationed what little savings she had for both her mother's medication and their basic needs. The pregnancy symptoms worsened, morning sickness, fatigue, an onslaught of hormones that left her tearful and terrified about the future. For the first time in her life, Nova felt truly hopeless. Memories of Damien's kindness cut deep, clashing with the cold image of him allowing security to drag her out without a second thought. She tried to reason that he might have been shocked, cornered by Vivian's theatrics. But the sting remained. Still, a flicker of resolve burned in her chest. She was determined to protect this child, whatever the cost. Late at night, she caught herself whispering to her growing belly, promising safety and love. She had no idea how she'd accomplish it, only that she had to. With or without Damien Cruz's support. While Nova struggled in her cramped apartment, Damien grew increasingly restless within the lavish walls of his estate. Something about Vivian's grand spectacle in the rose garden gnawed him, and he noticed inconsistencies in Sierra's behavior. One afternoon, he found her rummaging through confidential files in his office. Another time, he overheard her on the phone, referencing hush money deals. He began to suspect foul play. Desperate for clarity, he requested security footage from the day Nova was fired. To his surprise, a staff member discreetly handed him an audio recording captured by an inconspicuous camera near the garden entrance. Damien listened with growing horror as he heard Vivian instructing Sierra. "Don't worry, I've already made sure Dr. Monroe's files say you're pregnant," Vivian's voice purred. "Damien thinks he's going to be a father with you. And if that little maid tries to claim otherwise, we'll crush her credibility." Sierra replied, "But what if Nova actually has proof? Dr. Monroe might figure out the real test results." Vivian's tone turned cold. "I've taken care of that. I'm paying Dr. Monroe's silent partner enough to keep any test results in your favor. We just have to be sure Nova leaves quietly. Once this farce is over, you'll get your share, and I'll marry Damien unencumbered. Win-win." Damien's hands clenched around his phone. His mind raced, heart pounding as everything fell into place. Sierra had never been the one who was truly pregnant, Nova was. He remembered Nova's stunned silence, the heartbreak in her eyes when she was accused. He'd let himself be manipulated by Vivian's cunning theatrics. Without hesitation, he rushed to the medical suite, cornering Dr. Monroe. When confronted with the recording, her face paled. She tried to stammer an explanation about pressure and higher-ups. But Damien was done listening to excuses. He demanded, voice trembling with anger, "Tell me the truth, Dr. Monroe. Who is carrying my child?" She swallowed hard. "It's Nova Lane." Her test results got switched. "Sierra is not pregnant at all." Damien's chest tightened. Nova had been telling the truth, or at least she'd been wrongly accused. His mind flickered back to that stormy night in the cabin, the hazy memory of holding her close. Could he have let desire override his judgment in that vulnerable moment? Fury and regret swirled in him. He had to find Nova, apologize, and make things right, even if it meant shattering Vivian's carefully orchestrated plans. It didn't take long for Damien to discover where Nova lived. After all, the background checks performed when she was hired had included her address. With grim determination, he navigated his sleek sports car down the dilapidated streets, feeling guilt twist in his gut at the contrast between her humble neighborhood and the opulence he took for granted. Upon reaching the rundown apartment complex, he hurriedly climbed the creaking stairs. Each step echoed the pounding of his heart. Outside her door, he hesitated, rapping his knuckles softly. What right did he have to show up like this? The door swung open, revealing a wary Nova with dark circles under her eyes. She wore a faded t-shirt, her hair loosely tied back. The moment she saw Damien, her expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" He exhaled, removing his sunglasses. "Nova, I'm so sorry. I should have defended you." He paused, struggling to find the words. "I know the truth now. Vivian set you up. The pregnancy tests, Sierra, all of it." Tears glistened in her eyes, though her voice stayed firm. And what does that change, Damien? You still let them humiliate me. You fired me without even hearing my side. He stepped forward, longing to comfort her, but she placed a protective hand over her belly. Please, just give me a chance to fix this, he pleaded. Come back to the estate. I'll make sure you and your mother have the best care. I'll provide for you, and our child. Her jaw clenched. Damien, you can't just throw money at this. I don't trust you to stand by me when things get hard. A flicker of pain crossed his face. I understand. But I'm not asking for forgiveness overnight. Let me earn it. Let me help. I only recently learned about that night we spent in the cabin. I swear, Nova, I didn't intend for this to happen, but now that it has, I want to be a father to our baby. Silence enveloped them. In the next room, Lena coughed softly, reminding Nova of her mother's delicate condition. Conflicting emotions churned in Nova: anger, betrayal, and a small flicker of hope. She finally looked up, tears slipping down her cheeks. If I come back, it's not for luxury. It's so I can support my mom and give this baby a chance. Damien nodded, relief evident in his eyes. I promise, I'll protect you both. No more lies. No more betrayals. Nova hesitated, then softly stepped aside, allowing him to enter. It wasn't a full pardon, but it was a start. The future, at least, now held a glimmer of possibility. Within days, Damien arranged for Lena to be moved into a private suite at the cruise estate, ensuring she received top-notch medical care. Nova insisted on paying for a portion of the expenses once she got back on her feet, but for now, she accepted his help for her mother's sake. Tension still lingered between her and Damien. She maintained a cautious distance, uncertain if she could fully trust his promises. One afternoon, Lena, seated in a plush armchair near a sunlit window, beckoned for Nova and Damien to come closer. Her complexion looked better since she began receiving consistent treatment. I want to tell you both something, she began in a soft voice. It might help you understand why fate brought you together. Nova furrowed her brow. Mom, are you okay? You don't need to push yourself. Lena shook her head, smiling wanly. I'm all right, dear. It's time you knew. Your father once worked for the Cruz family, Damien's father, specifically. Damien's face reflected surprise. My father? That must have been decades ago. Before your family fortune exploded, your father ran a smaller enterprise, Lena explained. My husband, Nova's father, helped manage certain properties. He always spoke highly of the Cruz family, how they treated their employees with respect. But after he passed, we lost all connection. Times became hard. I never wanted to burden you with this knowledge, Nova, but it's why I always felt there might be a chance for us to find good fortune if we connected with the Cruzes again. Nova's eyes brimmed with tears. She had grown up resenting the hardships that befell them, never realizing her father once had a positive relationship with Damien's family. Damien, equally touched, reached for Lena's hand. I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. If I'd known earlier. Lena patted his hand gently. It's all in the past now. But sometimes life works in mysterious ways. Perhaps this child is part of a new beginning for both of you. Nova remained silent, her heart heavy with a mix of gratitude, sadness, and lingering doubt. Damien's gaze flickered between the two women, a solemn promise in his eyes. He would do whatever it took to honor the legacy their fathers once shared, and to forge a new path that could unite them all. Despite the swirling controversies, Damien insisted on hosting a grand charity gala at the estate, this time with renewed purpose. He wanted to publicly support underprivileged families, especially single mothers, and distance himself from the negative press spurred by Vivian's scandalous garden stunt. Nova debated whether to attend at all. Her role had officially changed. She was no longer just staff but an expecting mother carrying Damien's child. She stood before the mirror in her modest bedroom, smoothing down a simple, elegant gown that Damien had quietly delivered. The faint swell of her belly was visible, a testament to the life growing inside her. When she finally descended the sweeping staircase into the mansion's grand ballroom, the crowd hushed momentarily. Heads turned, cameras clicked, and a few hushed gasps rippled through the guests. Nova felt nerves knot in her stomach. But then she spotted Lena in the corner, beaming proudly in a wheelchair. And Damien, standing at the podium, gazed at her with such open admiration that her insecurities melted away. He took her hand, guiding her toward the microphone. Clearing his throat, he addressed the room. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Cruise Foundation's Family First benefit. Tonight, we raise funds for single mothers, domestic workers, and families in need." He looked down at Nova's hand in his. "I've realized recently how vital it is to support the people who are the backbone of our communities." Soft applause followed, and Nova couldn't help but smile. She saw sincerity in Damien's eyes, the same compassion that had first endeared him to her when she was but a timid interviewee in his office. They shared a dance, the soft music enveloping them. Whispers circled about them, some supportive, some scandalized. But for once, Nova didn't care. She felt safe in the circle of Damien's arms. Later, guests approached her with kindness rather than scorn, curious about her story and praising her grace. For the first time in weeks, Nova felt hope surge within her. Perhaps this was their chance for a fresh start, free from lies and manipulation. If only the shadows of Vivian and Sierra could be completely left behind. Vivian Black's carefully constructed world began to crumble. The board members of her business consortium discovered discrepancies in the financial statements, embezzlement, inflated budgets, clandestine deals. Word traveled fast in elite circles. Investors pulled out, partnerships dissolved, and soon Vivian faced the threat of criminal charges. Still reeling from the blow to her reputation, Vivian retreated to the estate, determined to salvage what she could of her engagement with Damien. She cornered him in his study, a manic edge to her once composed demeanor. "You can't break our agreement. My name is on those business contracts, your brand needs me." Her voice rose with desperation. Damien fixed her with a cold stare. "No, Vivian. You used me, lied to me, and tried to ruin Nova's life. And as for our engagement, it was over the moment you humiliated her in front of the entire estate." She advanced, tears of rage sparkling in her eyes. "Don't you see? I did it for us, for the power couple we were meant to be. How dare you throw me away over some lowly maid?" He shook his head, a tinge of sadness in his gaze. "Nova is more honest, more compassionate, more genuine than you ever were. Now, please leave my home before I have security escort you out." Vivian screamed curses, but no one came to her defense. Her allies had vanished, her illusions of grandeur collapsing around her like a house of cards. With one last hateful glare, she stormed out, knowing she had lost the man and the fortune she'd so meticulously pursued. Across the estate, Nova heard the echoes of Vivian's tirade. For a moment, pity tugged at her heart. Vivian had dug her own grave, a victim of her own greed. With Vivian's downfall, Nova sensed the final barrier to her and Damien's future might be gone. But she remained guarded. Life had taught her not to assume happy endings too soon. Winter arrived with an unrelenting chill, blanketing the estate grounds in white. Nova's pregnancy advanced, and despite top medical care, an early labor pain caught everyone off guard. Late one evening, snow swirled outside the tall windows, and she felt a sharp, sudden contraction. Alarm shot through her. She clutched her belly, calling out for help. Damien, who was reviewing paperwork in his study, rushed to her side. "Hold on, I'll call Dr. Monroe," he said, his voice shaking. They soon learned the storm had caused road closures, an ambulance would be delayed. Fear threaded through Nova's mind as her contractions intensified. Damien refused to leave her side, ushering her into a prepared guest suite. Lena tried to help, but her own health was too fragile, so she stayed near, praying softly. The estate staff hurried to boil water and gather fresh linens, while Dr. Monroe fought through snowdrifts to reach the house. By the time Dr. Monroe arrived, Nova's face was pale with pain, and her breathing labored. Damien held her hand, whispering words of comfort. "You're strong, Nova. We'll get through this together." Somehow, between the howling wind outside and the tension inside, Nova found the strength to push. Tears blurred her vision as she gave one final, determined effort. A baby's sharp cry pierced the air. Relief, awe, and overwhelming love flooded the room. "It's a boy," Dr. Monroe announced, carefully placing the newborn into Nova's trembling arms. Damien leaned in, eyes wet with unshed tears, gently touching the baby's tiny fingers. Nova felt a surge of gratitude. Despite the turmoil, the lies, and the heartbreak, she held in her arms a perfect miracle. Damien kissed her forehead, voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving us this gift." And in that moment, the world outside seemed to fade, leaving just the three of them, bound by a love neither had expected. In the weeks that followed, Nova healed slowly, adjusting to sleepless nights and round-the-clock feedings. The estate, once a place of scandal and uncertainty, now pulsed with fresh energy. Visitors came bearing gifts and well wishes. Even the press had softened its stance, intrigued by the story of the humble housemaid turned new mother to a billionaire's child. Damien, inspired by Nova's resilience, officially launched the Lane Cruz Foundation, aimed at supporting single mothers, domestic workers, and those who lacked access to proper medical care. A grand press conference ensued, but Nova chose to watch from the sidelines, rocking her newborn son. She smiled as she listened to Damien's heartfelt speech. Too often, society overlooks those who labor tirelessly behind the scenes. My aim is to lift them up, to ensure they have the resources and support needed to thrive. This foundation is named for two families, the Lanes, who showed unwavering strength in adversity, and the Cruzes, who strive to honor integrity and compassion. Applause thundered across the crowd. Nova felt tears prick her eyes. The foundation was more than a philanthropic endeavor, it was a symbol of unity, of combining her world with Damien's to create something that could genuinely help others. In a quiet moment afterward, Damien joined her in a secluded corner of the estate garden, baby swaddled in his arms. "I hope I'm doing the right thing," he murmured. Nova touched his shoulder gently. "Damien, this is wonderful. You're giving people opportunities they never dreamed of. Just like you gave me, and my mother, a second chance." He nodded, pressing a tender kiss to the baby's forehead. "I couldn't have done it without you. Without our little one." As the sun dipped low, they stood there in a soft hush of gratitude, the future looking brighter than ever. Spring blossoms dotted the Cruz estate with delicate petals, a reflection of the new life sprouting within its walls. Nova's son, now a few months old, cooed in her arms as she strolled through the garden. Tiny birds hopped along the paths, and the sweet scent of budding roses filled the air. Damien approached, hands tucked in his pockets. He wore a warm smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Can I join you?" She nodded, and they walked together, pausing by a tranquil koi pond. Light danced on the surface of the water, reflecting flecks of gold on the baby's soft cheeks. Then, unexpectedly, Damien turned to her, reaching into his jacket to pull out a small velvet box. Nova's breath caught in her throat. "Nova," he said, voice trembling. "I know our story hasn't been traditional. We've faced misunderstandings, betrayal, and circumstances none of us could have predicted. Yet through it all, you've shown kindness, strength, and a fierce love for our child. Every day, you remind me how precious life is and how important it is to stand by the people we care about." Her heart thundered as he opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Will you marry me? Not because of obligation or scandal, but because I truly love you. I love who you are, and I want to build a future with you, and our son, together." Tears welled in her eyes. She glanced down at their baby, who gazed innocently at the world. Images of her mother's health struggles, the heartbreak of being fired, and the stormy night that changed everything all flashed through her mind. And then she saw the man before her, flawed yet earnest, offering his entire heart. "Yes," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, exhaling with visible relief. Drawing her close, he pressed his lips to hers in a tender kiss. In that moment, the koi pond rippled, blossoms drifted in a gentle breeze, and time stood still for the small family that had fought so hard for this love. Neither of them could predict what challenges lay ahead, but they knew they would face them side by side. Surrounded by the fragrance of spring and the promise of new beginnings, Nova Lane, once a humble housemaid, accepted a future of partnership, hope, and unwavering devotion with the billionaire she never expected to love. The end.